walk me through kind of your whole experience with like learning how to sing, and obviously there's a lot of like muscles you have developed that work the right way when you want them to work the right way. I mean, what's that like? Kind of learning that and becoming just someone who does that as a hobby. I mean, you're not on stage necessarily, right? But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you know that there's muscles involved with that.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So I loved singing. I started voice lessons my sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
I was literally, so and again, another like very shaping moment. I was literally paying someone to tell me everything that I was doing wrong.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Everybody Has a podcast where I prove to the world that now that I have a podcast, everybody in the world has a podcast. My name is Marco Santana, and with me today, this time, is Cassie Muffley. Cassie, first of all, welcome to the show. Before I get into what you're all about, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Marco. Excited to be here.
Well, that's good, because we'll see if we can reduce that excitement so we can get some real
bring it back
real
down
serious
to earth,
questions.
back down to reality.
Yeah,
right. Everybody has a podcast. This is no big deal.
That's right. It's just a podcast. But yeah. Kathy, you're so I know you from Orlando specifically, obviously, but I ran into you through a lot of Department of Defense related initiatives. Tell me what you're doing now, because I know you're. While I know you from Orlando, I know some of the things you're doing are kind of national, trying to cut some a lot of the defense ecosystems around the country, bring them on the same page for certain things. Right? Can you talk about that a little bit? We'll start with that. We'll start with the fun stuff, right?
Yeah, sure. So you are right that even though I'm still here in Orlando, I am doing work nationally now. So I work for an organization called the National Security Innovation Network. It is a DoD program office nested within DIU, the Defense Innovation Unit. So my role within the organization is I'm the national director of the Defense Innovation On-Ramp Hub. So there's these off-base innovation collaboration centers. There's 5 of them currently located. So our first 5 locations are located in Wichita, Kansas, Dayton, Ohio, Renton, Washington, just outside of Seattle, Phoenix, Arizona, and then Honolulu, Hawaii.
Okay, that's fantastic, and you know it's funny because you mentioned innovation, and as someone who's covered tech for a very long time, and I think it's amazing because the defense industry was the first innovation industry, right, way back in the day. Can you talk a little bit just about just how big innovation is? Especially today, as really anybody with a cell phone can be innovative nowadays, right? But to kind of try to wrangle up the really bright minds to do that in the form of something to get in front of the DoD and that kind of thing. Talk about that that whole process.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different sides of that, and that's what kind of we as an organization live to do, as well as these on-ramp hubs. One, the folks who already know that they want to do business with us, we know that as a DoD, we're not the easiest to do business with. So we are working to break down those barriers,
Right.
Get across that valley of death, make it easier to do work with us, as well as go out and find those non-traditionals, those early stage startups, or even more mature companies who have really cool technology that have no idea that the DoD or the government would be interested in it. So we're really looking for opportunities for dual use technologies that can both be they're viable commercially as well as have military applications.
And that's one of the things. I think it's funny that the old stories are like spam, right? And all it's like so back 30, 40, or now, gosh, 40 years ago, you had a lot of defense innovation, kind of like the scientists at NASA, et cetera, being the innovators. That then some of that stuff trickled into the commercial market, but that has completely flipped its head, where commercial innovators, or probably the DoD, is being a lot more open to saying, okay, this is out there in commercial. How can we incorporate that. Can you talk about that a little bit? Just the flip, almost the flip of kind of what we had a long time ago.
Yeah, and I think, Marco, what really drives that flip is funding. So
Hmm.
back in those times that you were talking about, if you looked at who was spending the most money on research and development, at that point, the federal government was spending more money than anybody else on research and development. That has flipped. Now private industry is spending more on
Right.
research and development than the government is. So we recognize that if we want to take advantage of those technologies, that we need to partner with industry in new ways, because we are no longer um, leading that. And I think that model probably works out better for everybody, because
Yeah.
now it's
Yeah.
not just the government coming up with all of this great stuff and maybe some industry members could commercialize some of that. It's actually starting within the local economy, making an impact in the local economy first, and then coming over for government use.
When did you kind of jump into the DoD side of things, and why in this kind of sector of the DoD?
Yeah, so I had zero intent of working for the DoD. Actually, I remember in high school I had a freeze period, and the recruiters would come, and I would do everything I could to avoid them, because there was, grew up near an Air Force base there in Montana, Malmstrom. No desire. Went on, got an engineering degree, and lo and behold, the only engineering jobs in towns were at the Air Force Base. So I actually started as an intern at the Air Force Base while I was still in college. Um,
Okay.
so I have stayed DoD my entire career. It was something that I'm really thankful for. Like I said, it's not something that I was
Yeah.
ever pursuing, but it's a great fit and really has been had a lot of job satisfaction.
What is your kind of, as you've been doing this and growing? I mean, are you? Uh, do you ever kind of meet someone and be like, "Oh my God, that guy's just phenomenal"? Obviously you're working with all these organizations. I mean, tell me a little bit about just your interactions with the people that you right now you were supporting with your work.
Yeah. So, and that's been, I think, the really unique thing about having and visiting these on ramp hubs in these multiple
Mm,
locations across the country, because sometimes we get in our mind what an entrepreneur or an innovator looks like.
right,
I think stereotypically, a lot of times we think, oh, it's the young guys in the hoodies,
right,
sitting
right.
behind the computer.
The, the Mark
And
Zuckerbergs.
but that's right, but that's not what they look like everywhere. So
Right.
one of my favorite events that I went to was an event at On Ramp Hub, Kansas, and the innovators there who were pitching their startups, that's not what they look like. It was the retired fire chief. It was the father son team who run a farm, but they also created this widget. And just
Yeah.
the idea that it doesn't matter kind of what your background looks like, you have a place here, and that having that diversity of perspective and ideas, I think, is so important.
Let's talk a little bit about just your upbringing, right? You're rural Montana. Like I said, I did not know that until you said that back, and but that's phenomenal though. As I'm a Midwesterner, so the different kind of area of the world that I live in now, but there's still some things that I bring with me from as a Midwesterner. What are some of the things that you kind of bring to your everyday life, probably unintentionally, right? Just kind of intrinsically, as go through your life, not necessarily working, but just kind of being around here in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that have taken with me from my upbringing in rural Montana. So when I say rural Montana, I mean there were, I think, 26 kids in my graduating class. I was in the same
Wow.
building K through 12. My mom was
Okay.
actually my fifth grade teacher because she was the only teacher. Um,
Right.
so it's just, yeah. So when I say small and rural, I mean it.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
You're not
so
a poser.
yeah, so not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's a different
Right.
level of rural, I think, than some people sometimes think. Um, but I think one of the biggest things growing up, and then of course pre-internet, pre-Amazon,
Right.
none of us had a whole lot. If you wanted something, you had to do it yourself, and so it forced that ingenuity. It forced you to be
Mm.
um, innovative and just get it done. And if you need something, you make it yourself, and then also relying on your neighbors because you are all each other has. If you
Right.
want, if somebody open, so sometimes you'll see interesting things in small places in Montana. Like you'll see a really, fancy little coffee shop in the middle of nowhere. And like, how did this happen? Well, because everybody knows that they've probably known the owner since they were kids and knows that if we want to have nice things, we need to support each other. And so taking those kind of lessons learned about you don't have to have all the resources in the world. Sometimes you can just get it done, and then relying
Yeah.
on those around you, I think, has made a huge difference. And interestingly enough, Marco, I was just there a week ago. Where I grew up still does not have cell service.
Do you kind of look back? Do you appreciate more kind of when you are able to, have these conversations, for example, and just be able to, you know, uh, do your work, simply. And I don't know. I feel like there's a question that I can't get to. That's just about like just having a better appreciation because you were there. You've had a place where you couldn't get to the network.
Right. I think that's probably twofold. One is having access to different people and different thoughts and different mind. I love
Yeah.
all the people that I grew up with. I love my hometown, but there's just some growth I feel like that only takes place when you start interacting with people who think differently and making those different
Hmm.
connections. It helps you to kind of challenge your own thoughts and just to grow and learn new things, as well as I think the other side of that you're talking about is how easily it is to connect. While, yes,
Hmm.
here in Orlando today, I often travel for work, visiting these different locations, but continuing to be able to stay connected to whoever, wherever, just instantaneously is such a blessing. And it makes it, again, that collaboration so much more possible that now that you're able to closely work with and do things with people who are literally across the world.
Well, what was your upbringing like? I think you mentioned 4-H at some point.
Yes.
Talk to me because I used to live. I lived in. So I always say I'm from Chicago, but I'm not from Chicago. I'm from suburban Chicago, but the very edge of the suburbs, where like you go a couple towns west, and you have the state fairs, or the county fairs, and they're all everyone is working on a lamb or something. They're raising something to show off.
Yeah.
What was that? Can you take me back to that? What was that like, kind of growing up and so you showed?
I showed lambs.
Okay,
So while my
what
immediate
what makes
family,
a good show lamb? What makes a good show lamb?
so Marco, you're asking the right person. I won showmanship almost every year. So,
Oh, okay,
so
perfect.
there's two competitions with that.
I
One
had
is
a
your
champ. I had a champion on. I didn't even
right.
know.
Who
What the hell?
knew?
I'm gonna have to fire my researcher. But yeah, tell me what makes a good lamb.
Yeah. So there's like the actual market side of it. Are they the meat side of it because you're raising
Right,
them to be eaten?
right. I don't want to
So
mention that, but yeah, they taste
well,
pretty
and
good.
there were lots of tiers, every year because I would name them and they were like pets. Marco, I
Oh,
would
that's a
take
bad
them for walks.
idea.
I would take them for walks every day, but that was part of it to, so that they weren't fat and lazy. They were getting the exercise they needed.
Well, I
And
think the end consumer probably thanks you for taking them on those walks. So the meat was nice and
right, and they're not eating garbage. It's
right.
very, very, very good meat. But yeah, then the
Well, tell me.
showmanship side of things is just, basically showing off, getting the judge's attention, pick pick
Yeah,
me as far as my animal.
yeah. I've been to a couple of the fairs. Like I said, like I actually one of my early jobs was in Des Moines, Iowa, and they have a lot of that stuff right down the street. So I go to those things when I'd be working weekend duty,
Yeah,
and as a storyteller, I felt like drunk on story. You know what I mean? On stories, like they were just everywhere. Like everybody had
right,
this phenomenal story about like you said, either they really loved their animal and they had to get rid of it, or there's the opposite side of just like they don't care. They don't care. They just want to win the competition.
right.
Um,
Win the
you know,
competition and get the check.
exactly. Well, you know what's funny? Because sometimes, not to like again, I'm not pretending to be an expert, but like, man, that check can be pretty sizable if you get to the right level, and yeah.
Right, right.
and again, this is an interesting question, I think, because I think I don't know if you ever think about this way. So if I take you off guard, I apologize. But I mean, you go through that. You go through that as when you're younger. You develop habits. You develop discipline. You develop a goal. You develop something. You have a goal. It's June or July of whatever. You have to be ready by then. What kind of values did that instill in you? Kind of doing that showmanship and that kind of stuff. What kind of values do you think that you still have today?
Yeah, so I credit 4-H, and then we can talk about this later. My involvement in music is kind of the two things that have shaped me
Yeah,
most, and I think were
yeah,
the most valuable things that I did growing up to create who I am today. So, because with that,
yeah,
you're like you had mentioned, there's timelines, so you got to worry about time management. You actually have to kind of learn the business side of it. So
yeah.
you have to keep your books as far as how much you're paying for feed and this and that and what how much it
And
is
you're a teenager, right? You're a teenager when this is happening.
or elementary school
Or
even. They're
elementary.
very
Yeah,
young.
yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
you're learning the business side of it. You're all of this stuff, you're learning that responsibility. Then sometimes you would go out even the sales side of it. Sometimes you would
Hmm.
pre-sell your animal or invite, bidders to come to the auction. And then there was a bunch of other things in 4-H that were, I think, just as valuable as the animal piece of it. So there was a
Yeah,
lot of different other things you could do, like cooking and sewing and all of that sort of thing. But I think the best thing was that we were required to give speeches annually.
yeah.
So
Okay.
from the time that we're like in third grade, we are giving speeches or a
Yeah.
demonstration in front of a group of people. I think that is one of the most valuable skills that you can learn, is getting comfortable communicating in front of a group of people from a young age.
You mentioned you singing. You knew we were going to talk about this because I think
Yeah.
you created probably one of the highlights of maybe my time in Orlando. I don't know when it comes to like spontaneous, right?
Yeah.
Spontaneous, at least from my perspective, that wasn't involved in the planning, of course. But we were all at a conference, a tech conference, last October, and we happened to be in a hall, and it was Dave Vance who does the Orlando Life. Um, uh, he, I don't know exactly how it worked, but all I know is that next thing you know, I see Cassie singing, and I forgot what's the name of that hall over there. What's the name?
Steinmetz Hall.
Steinmetz Hall in Orlando, and singing opera, right? Now I'm not going to ask you to duplicate that because obviously the sound
Acoustics
would
are
be
different.
the
Yeah.
acoustic would be a lot different. But talk to me about that. We'll talk about the Steinmetz thing eventually.
Hmm.
But where did that come from? Obviously, it comes from your upbringing again. You just mentioned, but like, what's that again? What's that like to? Because I can't sing for anything. I swear, like I go up to karaoke thinking I'm awesome, and I'm like, oh wait, no, maybe I'm not. But walk me through kind of your whole experience with like learning how to sing, and obviously there's a lot of like muscles you have to develop that work the right way when you want them to work the right way. I mean, what's that like? Kind of learning that and becoming just someone who does that as a hobby. I mean, you're not on stage necessarily, right? But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. And I love that you know that there's muscles involved with
right,
that.
yeah, 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 100%.
Yeah. So I loved singing. I started voice lessons my sophomore year of high school. So
Oh,
I
okay.
was literally, so, and again, another like very shaping moment. I was literally paying someone to tell me everything that I was doing wrong. So if that doesn't,
Oh,
I loved
and
her, but she
for
was
most people,
terrifying.
for most people,
Um,
I would do that for free for most people. I'll just go ahead and tell you. But anyway, go on. I digress. Go ahead.
yes, I love it. But yeah, so when I love her, but she was terrifying. So you were too afraid to like be nervous and like mess up, and you just did what you were supposed to do.
Right,
But
right,
so
right.
I loved it. Did voice lessons all through high school. Actually, my senior year of high school, again, this is the kind of stuff that happens in a very small town. So I
Right.
actually taught high school choir my senior year of high school.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes. So our music teacher, again, K through 12, she had been struggling with some health issues and just was
Yeah.
not able to make it back. And I had been um helpful the previous year. I remember one time I actually went into the principal's office with a list of the names and phone numbers of all of the retired music teachers in the area. Start making some phone calls because the subs that you're hiring are not it. Yes, yes. Do you expect anything less from me?
No, honestly,
I've always
listen.
been a
Most
little spicy, Marco.
Yeah,
Um,
well, listen, I'm hoping I'm hoping I get more than like 100 listeners. So, but I guarantee that the ones who are listening do not know you in that sense, and I love that because I think that's
right,
hilarious. I mean, what is it about opera specifically, right? Because there's a lot of genres that you could have pursued, just like any other
right.
field. There's many genres. What was it about opera that kind of drew you? Because what I love about opera, I'm not gonna pretend to be an expert, but I have seen a couple of them. But what I love about them is, and I'll put a more general person's kind of way. If you understand what they're saying, the storytelling is amazing.
Right.
So, what was it about opera that kind of drew you?
So one thing is because it's challenging. I really
Yeah,
like a challenge, and if it's too easy, I am not interested. Also love this the storytelling side of it because it is a challenge because most people don't understand what you're singing. So you have
yeah,
to be more expressive with your face and your mannerisms
right.
and all that stuff to get the story across. But then the other thing with that is, Marco, I'm just not that cool. I am not cool enough to be some sort of a pop star.
Right. You were never a Taylor Swift in the making or anything like that.
No, I am not that cool.
Well, that's fantastic, though, and I think so. How did that come about then? Because like fast forward to what last October, and let me kind of recap again. It was a tech conference. You're
Yep.
there for the they're there because you're in defense industry technology. Um, it was a exhibit hall that happened to be Steinmetz Hall. First of all, the
Yes.
coolest exhibit hall you'll ever see.
Right?
But next thing you know, there's this buzz coming around that Cassie's gonna sing, because people know you, some people know you around here, so we all
Yeah.
kind of talked about it, and we're like, first of all, the first response was like, wait, what the hell's going on? Like, what? But then we see you over there, and what I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but was a part of you kind of like proud, like this is like something that you're good at, and it's not nobody really knows about it. This is really cool to be able to showcase this to my quote unquote this area of my life. I mean, did that come into it? Or was it a bunch of nerves?
Uh, no, I've gotten over the nerves.
Yeah,
I've sang enough times, but I think for me, the one, it was just pure shenanigans. Dave found out the night
right,
before that I could sing, and he's like, "Hey, we should do this." Sure, why
right,
not? This sounds like
right,
fun.
and you're up
Um,
for it,
Right, but for me, the special part of it is two of my worlds colliding, and that's something that I
right?
feel like, just on a personal level, needs to happen more often in the tech and innovation communities. Is bringing together the art community and the
Yeah,
traditional tech community, because sometimes, and I feel like I lived kind of both of those worlds as an engineer as well as a vocalist. Sometimes as engineers and the tech side of things, we get so focused on the nuts and bolts of things that we forget to be
yeah,
creative.
yeah.
So we need that artistic side in to come make better things, make beautiful things. I think that's where real innovation can really happen, as we merge the art side of things as well as the tech side of things.
Well, I think that's one of the not- the discussion point of STEAM versus STEM, right? I
Yeah,
think that's a huge discussion point out there, and I think you and you have people on both camps,
right,
very also very art like very they know they're right on both sides,
right,
and I think but I think to me it's a matter of like STEM is fantastic and something I hope my nieces and nephews get into as early as possible. But then you throw STEAM in there, and I think that just gives you more versatility. of what you can do in that STEM field or in those worlds. I mean, talk obviously as someone who's been a singer or who's been singing and musician for since you were a teenager. Um, ma- talk to me a little bit about just your perspective on the importance of art in the tech world.
Yeah, so I'm definitely on the STEAM versus STEM
Right,
team. I hate that sometimes people feel like that it should be one versus the other. I feel like STEAM
right,
is it's the STEAM. It empowers what STEM already is doing. So I am
hmm,
absolutely an advocate of, young people pursuing career paths in STEM. But what I think that we forget is there is absolutely an artistic side of that that makes it better, whether it
right,
be, and we just don't think about that. And we steer kids in the, so, and that was kind of where I was at with, I mean, singing is a little different, but
right,
there are different things that I didn't know about when I was young that I could have leverage that artistic side of myself toward tech and innovation and that sort of thing. So even beyond the, oh, we're going to come up with greater ideas if we live in this world where everybody's working together and the artists and the tech folks are all, coming up with brilliant ideas. Well, you
right.
even think about the existing technology. User interface has become such an important piece of
Yes.
it. If
Hmm.
it's ugly and it's clunky, it's not going to be nearly as effective. I think
Or
that,
as appealing.
right, right. And
Right.
it's not going to be, and then from the business side, it's not going to be as successful because it's just not going to get utilized. And
Yeah.
I think that that's hopefully something that both sides, STEAM and STEM, can get behind, because that traditional STEM technology is just not going to go as far without kind of that artistic, human centered touch to it.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Obviously, you have a pretty cool experience when it comes to all the things you did in school, and then beyond, and now working with this in a multi cajillion dollar industry of defense. But you know, what are some of the challenges that you faced? One of the things I want this podcast to be is to like let people know that regardless of where we are as a human being, as a guest, there were obstacles along the way. It's not easy to succeed, especially if you're in certain industries. So, what are some of the challenges that you've kind of faced down throughout your career, your life? I mean, I don't want to pry. I'm not prying here, but like anything you want to talk about that's kind of like a challenge you overcame and how you overcame
Yeah, I think, gosh, it's hard to pick just one.
it.
There's been
Right,
a
right,
lot
right.
of challenges over over the course of my career. I think the biggest challenge for me was letting go of control and the way I thought things were supposed to be. So like I had mentioned, I have an engineering background and yeah. So I so wanted to tightly control things. I was the person that first semester of college, I had it laid out what class I was taking which semester through graduation. I had this whole master plan
Right.
and I was walking down that for like a decade and I was not really getting anywhere. But I
Huh.
was so, focused on that. And it just wasn't working for me. So like one of the biggest challenges I had to overcome was kind of getting over myself and my plans for myself.
Right, right,
Um,
right, right,
so yeah, like 10 years in, I finally started making a pivot because I had been doing so traditional engineering type stuff
right.
for all of that time. And I was bored out of my mind. I was like, I became an engineer because I want to solve problems and I want to use my brains, and I'm just managing contract stuff. Yuck. This is
Right,
not what
right,
I signed up to do, and I'm just not getting where I want to be. So then I opened up, started making these pivots. What do I want to be when I grow up? And letting go of
right.
control. That was one of the biggest things that I had to overcome, but it was one of the best things that I could have done.
Um, what is we are in an environment now. I think for years everyone has been saying it's getting better, which I do believe, but the numbers aren't necessarily exploding. They're kind of trickling upward when it comes to percentage of women and percentage of workforce that are women in tech. But I've always said that, and I think that to get the best tech, to get the best ideas, you need to have everybody in the room, right? Obviously, you have a much different viewpoint of this, but when you look at women in tech and kind of like just trying to promote or encourage others to get into the tech industry, that it's more open and inclusive than before. What's your messaging on that? And I hate to put you on the spot about with that, but I do believe that it's something that you would have a pretty strong opinion on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's important to continue to see more women in tech and women in defense, like you said, and kind of goes back
Mhm.
to some of our conversations earlier about having that diversity of thought.
Right.
Because if you have the same minds and the same mindsets and everybody looks the same in the room, you're going to get the same things in the same ways that we've always been doing things. And a lot of
Right.
times there's unintended consequences of decisions because we didn't have all the perspectives in the room. And even if you look at some of the data behind, I know like women being on the boards of businesses and stuff like that, the data
Right.
shows that those businesses are actually more profitable than when they only have men on the board. So there is from both sides of it, not just that this is the right thing to do, but there's
Right.
data
Right.
showing that we need to have more women in defense, in tech, and it not just in there as the entry level positions, but actually in
Hmm.
leadership roles.
It's funny because there's a discussion point that's really important, which is the workforce workforce discussion where just the number of bodies are just not where they need to be for certain big companies that need certain certifications, etc. So like when you look at two sisters and nieces and all that, and it's like I try to encourage them as soon as possible to start learning the STEM, because the STEAM, okay, but because that to me is kind of the future of tech, and this workforce shortage is opening it up for everybody, and that I think that's I love that more people are talking about it and more people are
Mhm.
considering, and it's funny because even women, I mean, when you look at women in defense, it's even smaller, isn't
Yes,
it?
women in defense, and
Yeah.
then women like in technical roles in defense.
Right, 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 right.
Um, when I was very young, I was very aware of it. Oh my gosh, I'm the only woman in the room. I don't even notice anymore because it's just normal. It is
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
better. But one thing that I will say that I really appreciate about the community is most of the women are so incredibly supportive and willing
Yeah.
to mentor each other and help each other out. Other because I know that sometimes women can not always be the nicest to other women. But I will say that's not the experiences that I've had working with other women in STEAM and STEM and in the defense industry.
Yeah, listen, if I could solve that problem here, I would have the biggest podcast in the world. So,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit. This is called the Everybody Has a Podcast, as I said earlier. I am the final one through the threshold to create a podcast. Um, but the Huberman Lab
Yeah.
is one that you mentioned, because I think one of my favorite question so far has been like, what's your favorite podcast? Because I think it's a really cool variety of answers. And talk to me about the Huberman Lab. I looked it up a little bit. It looks very nerdy.
Yes.
But
Very nerdy.
are you very nerdy yourself? Can you talk
I
about the podcast a
am
little
very nerdy. Like, and
bit?
that whole podcast
Nerds are
alone.
the cool people today. Nerds are the cool people nowadays.
I know, and I was thinking about that with these questions. I was like, gosh, like I don't listen to anything for fun. Like I just want to continue to learn. Like that's what's
Yeah, that's
exciting
great.
for
Yeah,
me. And I love that because it's all about human performances and kind of like hacking your health and like learning all of these different things about how I can perform better as a human.
right, right.
Because I got a lot of stuff that I want to do still yet, so I need to make sure
I hear
that I
that.
am making the most of my time and taking care of myself.
Oh, I hear that. Listen, I have. something that I say, and I think it's a little more morbid, but bear with me. It says that like the smartest I'm ever going to be is the day that I die, because I
Yeah,
want to keep learning all up until that day. Hell,
absolutely.
I'm learning how the hell to do a podcast right now as we speak. So, um, but uh, but no, Kathy, look, I appreciate you joining me on this podcast. You've been a really cool friend as I met you, and I appreciate the time and the insight into 4-H and all the fun stuff we talked about today. And it's funny because I mean I think like the podcast being a mix of people I know and people I don't know. But the people I
Yeah.
know, like it's funny because no matter who it is, I've always been able to find like something that I didn't know, and I think that's phenomenal. That's what I love about this kind of thing. So,
Yeah, this has
um,
been a lot of fun.
I appreciate you, Cassie. For everyone else, thank you so much for watching. Let's hope at least one or two viewers made it this far. But this has been the Everybody Has a Podcast, where we chat and you listen. Hopefully, we all have a few laughs. So I'm Marco Santana. Cassie, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.